said you had a couple of options. What did you decide to do?
I decided to make myself unavailable. I decided to disappear. They said that they were looking for me for the charge of harboring a fugitive. And that was what I thought was the charge outstanding against me. And I never got charged with that, in fact, officially.
Why did you make yourself scarce? Because you thought that they were going to arrest you?
They wanted to, yes, I thought they were going to arrest me. And not only was I afraid that they were going to arrest me, I was afraid of what else, much more afraid of what else they would do.
Be specific. What do you mean?
Well, I was afraid that they would torture me, beat me. For example, Joan Bird, who was my co-worker in the medical cadre, had been beaten brutally. She was one of the Panther 21, hung outside of a window. If you see any of the pictures of her at that time, I mean, she was unrecognizable. The woman had been beaten beyond belief. And there was no guarantee that they would not do the same thing to me. And given the way that they were following me, all the things that were happening to me, I assumed that that was definitely, if not a possibility, a probability.
So you hid out. When was this?
This was in 71. I believe that this happened in about the end of 71.
You changed your appearance?
Somewhat, yeah.
You left town or you stayed in town? Okay, no comment.
No comment.
Right. How long did this continue?
Well, this continued for about 2 years. And
was a warrant issued for your arrest?
Well, let me tell you, what started to happen was that the government became more and more and more desperate in terms of their search for me. I think that they were under the impression that I had this wealth of information that they could beat out of me or torture out of me. What they did was they started a campaign to try me in the newspapers. And they set up a scenario which gave me very little possibility of remaining alive for much time. What they did, they began to charge me with everything and anything that any woman in the New York area was involved in. They began to charge me for things that only men had been involved in. And if they could not, if there was no stretch of the imagination that they could say I had been involved, what they would do is say, well, she planned it. Let me just clarify something. There were some charges. There was one charge that was out against me. I was accused of, in 1971, there was a charge of attempted robbery that was out against me. That was one that I was formally charged with that. It was later dismissed, but there was a charge against me. I don't want to give a false impression. But all of those charges that were the front pages of the Daily News, all of those day-to-day scandal sheet charges, I was never charged with officially. Just imagine you. Tomorrow someone says, you're wanted for murder. What do you do? How do you deal with that? Either you turn yourself in, and subject yourself to whatever may happen to you, or you run the risk of any cop, anywhere, coming and just blowing you away. Because once an accusation is made, then your life is worth 2 cents. I mean, and in my case, they set up a series of events that pushed me into the reality of that I knew that I had to leave the country. I had to do something because, you know, they were setting up the circumstances to just blow me away.
While she was underground, Assata Shakur...
Joanne Chesemeyer, also known as Assata Olugbala Shakur. Assata was born July 16, 1947 in Jamaica, Queens, New York. She comes from a family of riders. Her grandmother was no stranger to a shotgun and took no shit from white supremacists. Her Uncle Willie used to go around town snatching down white-only signs and drinking out their fountains and using their bathrooms. Assata was a very troubled kid. She broke many rules and she always ran away from home. Assata got her first taste of racism growing up when she tried to purchase a picture of Elvis. Assata was a huge Elvis fan. Assata tried to purchase the picture and the employees were trying to kick her out of the store. Assata raised hell and started yelling, "I just want my picture." The manager had to come over and handle the situation. As Assata got older, she found out that Elvis said the only thing a black person can do for him is shine his shoes and buy his records. Assata was devastated. Assata started running away from long periods at a time, bouncing from house to house, running into different teenagers that she met. She met a couple of teens named Pat and Ronnie. Pat and Ronnie always came up with illegal schemes to get money, and often dangerous schemes. One particular scheme they came up with, Assata was supposed to dress up as a prostitute. A lot of makeup on. Assata was trying to look older so she can draw in older men. They came up with a scheme to lure these men into this fake sex house. Assata got in the car with a man and told him he could pay a one-time fee that's good for a year, and after the one-time fee, you can come anytime you like. Assata and the man pulled up to a building. Assata gets out of the car, goes inside the building, opens the door which led to a back door and took off running with the man's money. An older friend of Assata, her mentor, went off on her. She explains the dangers of the streets and explained to Assata how she can get killed. Assata got into lots of trouble. Assata started stealing, using drugs, drinking alcohol, you name it. But one experience takes the cake and made her realize the streets are not for her. She was hanging around a bunch of boys one day and she sensed something wasn't right. Assata grabbed her purse and sweater and she told the boys that she'll be leaving. One of the boys grabbed Assata by the arm and said, "No, bitch, we got plans for you." and dragged her down to the floor. The rest of the boys tried to rip Assata's clothes off while they began to try to rape her. The only thing that saved Assata was a vase. Assata accidentally kicked over a vase, and one of the boys freaked out. The boy said if they mess up the house, his mom would kill him. After Assata heard that, she started throwing everything in sight, breaking everything that she can. So then the boys eventually decided to let her go. During and after her college years, she joined many black organizations. One of her early ones was the NAACP. In Assata's biography, she speaks on a meeting when the instructor was going around the room asking questions. The questions were, what would you do if they pushed you? And the room was supposed to respond, nothing. I'll just keep doing what I came to do. Another question, what would you do if they kicked you? The room should respond, I pray the Lord forgives them. Another question, what would you do if they spit on you? And your response should be, nothing. I'll just keep singing. Assata said, hell no. She'll never go for anything like that. Assata later joined the Black Panthers. Although she loved the Panthers, Assata felt they were too macho and lacked intelligence. Assata was always very outspoken, and one day she suggested that Huey P. Newton take up some speaking lessons, and the men of the Black Panthers went off on her. She said that the men were a bunch of yes men, and they feared Huey P. Newton so much that they were afraid to tell the truth. She loved the Black Panthers, but she felt like they dealt way too much with emotion rather than on a rational basis. Just because you can beat your chest and fight doesn't mean that you always should. On May 2nd, 1973, at approximately 1 a.m., Assata was traveling along the New Jersey Turnpike, along with Zaid Shakur and Sundiata Acoli. They were stopped due to a broken tail light by Trooper Warner Foster and James Harper. Conflicting accounts of what actually happened, but an all-out gunfight erupted. With Assata being shot multiple times and Zaid Shakur being killed. Assata was charged with kidnapping, murder, attempt murder, and multiple bank robberies. During the trial, Assata's close friend, Afeni Shakur, always remained optimistic. She always gave Assata words of encouragement. Afeni knew a lot of the claims were bullshit, and she knew that it was self-defense. Afeni had just went through the Panther 21 trial. The Panther 21 was 21 Black Panther members accused of bombing 2 police stations. The Panther 21 consisted of members like Lumumba Shakur, Ali Bey Hassan, Afeni Shakur, and Sundiata Acoli. They had over 156 charges, and all 156 charges were dropped in just 45 minutes. Every time Assata entered the courtroom, it was madness during her trials. One time, a mini riot even broke out. During the riot, they removed Assata and her accomplice, Kamal Siddiqui. Once the two figured out that they could be removed from the courtroom and put inside the same room where they had to listen to the court over an intercom, they agreed the next time that this happened that they would have sex and Assata would try to get pregnant. So after that, they created another disturbance, and it worked. In 1974, Assata gave birth to her daughter while still being incarcerated. Assata was bounced around a lot during her time in prison. On April 8, 1978, she was transferred to the maximum security prison for women in Alderson, West Virginia. This prison was designed to hold the most dangerous women in the country. She was locked up with a lot of high-profile women, like Lynette Frame, Sandra Good, and even Lolita LeBron. Assata's grandmother came all the way from North Carolina to visit her. And her grandmother told her that she had a vision that she'll be getting out of prison soon. On November 2nd, 1979, Assata escaped from Clinton Correctional Facility for Women. Members of the Black Liberation Army came in with false identifications, dynamite, and .45 caliber handguns. They tied up the COs, stole a van which led to another getaway car, and after a long manhunt, she finally escaped to Cuba. Cuba accepts all political refugees. Once Assata got to Cuba, Assata says she's good. She says she loves it over there. Cuba has free education, free healthcare, free dental, no taxes, and very little racism. Now today, 40 years later, the United States is still trying to make deals with Cuba to bring Assata back. Even with the mountain of evidence and the death of Stanley Cohen, the man who has scientific evidence that can prove Assata couldn't have done what they said she done. Once Assata was shot in her arm, she was paralyzed. According to reports, from the angle that the officer was killed, Assata was the one that was supposed to have taken the shot. Stanley Cohen had evidence that can debunk all that. And Stanley Cohen was mysteriously found dead the minute he came up with all the evidence. Even with well-documented COINTELPRO illegal operations, the U.S. is still trying to convict Assata. President Trump and New Jersey's Governor Christie is still trying to bring Assata home.
3219876. You okay?
Let it roll.
Okay. What happened?
Well, between 1 and 4 p.m. on Friday is visiting time at Clinton. Apparently, Joanne Chesimard had some visitors who came to this gate right here at the edge of the institution. Their ID was checked. They went in to visit her in South Hall. South Hall is our maximum security building here. We have 17 women in that building. They pulled guns, were able to overpower a couple of officers, a male and female officer, and get her out. Put the officers in the back of the van, and they drove the van across an unfenced area in back of the institution to the adjoining Hunterdon State School. There they got out of the van and fled in vehicle or vehicles, and the officers freed themselves and were uninjured.
Well, how many were there?
More than one is the best information. They're interviewing staff, inmates, and other possible witnesses right now.
How were they able to get in here with guns?
That's part of the investigation.
There's a sign right there that says anyone coming in is subject to being searched.
That's true. I don't know how they did it. I think our investigation will determine that.
What about the identities of the people? At some point, didn't they have to sign in here and show something?
Yes, they have to be on an approved visitors list. These people showed ID and were on the visitors list. They were able to come in that way.
Well, then you must have identities on them.